really just takes it open. It's not. It's just gonna take a little time. Yeah, it takes a little bit. I just think
I like the visual sources that you get with your synthesis essays. I think they're very helpful. I think some people kind of get concerned and put off by them because you're not exactly sure what to do with them, how to approach them. I like them because they give you a lot of freedom and flexibility to do different things. Now, you are guaranteed to get at least one visual source from every AP exam synthesis question that would take place, and in some cases you would be getting two. They can range in a variety of things. You could be getting, you don't have to write this part down, but you could be getting like charts or tables, that are going to have more data to them. There have been political cartoons. There have also just kind of been cartoons, like comic strips. There have been book covers. There have been photographs. Some meant to be artistic in nature, some just meant to be a photograph. There's a picture of a kid singing in music class one time. Actually, I guess there was two kids singing in music class. There have been standardized tests where you just see like a picture of them. There was one where it was a standardized test question that showed up on a kindergarten test one year. We've had paintings before. There have been ads, like that would be within a newspaper or magazine. The one year there were 4 pictures of pennies.
That doesn't make any sense. Hey, that was pretty good one.
Take that
I
one.
like that one. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That year was a synthesis essay about whether the penny should be abolished or not. So they had a picture of a more recent penny. They had a picture of a penny from like, I don't know, 1813. I think they had a picture of a penny from like 17 something, whatever.
That's probably a pretty valuable penny.
It could be.
You could probably get a pretty penny for that.
Leave it to the professional.
No, I'm gonna try and get into this.
Andy gave him a number 1 for that, so that was good. So the sources could be just about anything. They can go all over the place, and I think it would be silly for us to go, hey, I think this year it's going to be a photograph or it's going to be a political cartoon. The nice thing about them is they'll give you a little bit of background sometimes, but it gives you a lot of freedom to do different things, because where you would have a passage that you need to analyze for some things like rhetorical analysis or for the synthesis, and it can be misinterpreted based on the information that's there. A lot of the visual sources can kind of go in either direction of the argument. So, Nicole could be using the visual source to state one thing, Katie could be using it to state something else, Amanda could both be using it to do something else. So you can get 4, 5, 6, 7 options sometimes out of those visual sources. If you're looking at a visual source and you go, I don't know how to approach this, this is where we go to our good old mnemonic devices, our acronyms, and the one that we do for a visual source is OPTIC. The nice thing about OPTIC is it's a real word. It's not diddles. Still fun to say though. Diddles, diddles, diddles. Could be. But at least OPTIC is something that you associate with like visual sources, so I think in some ways it can be it can be a little bit easier to recall. And it's really not anything groundbreaking that you would not already do. I don't expect you to go, wow, Mr. Kane, you just opened up my eyes to a whole other world of visual sources. But it's a good way to just kind of keep some things in mind. So the O is overview. P is parts. T is title. I, inferences, and C, conclusion. So when it comes to overview, basically you're looking at overall big picture, what do you see? Parts, you're focusing in on details. The title, you're using if available. There are, I'd say more often than not, you don't really get a title. If it's a painting, you could have a title to it, or some artistic photographs. Inferences, you're going to start to make connections on your own. And then conclusion, you're basically tying it all together, kind of coming up with what's the point. Here's the nice thing. You already do this with literature, prose, paragraphs. You read something, you try to figure out what's going on, you focus in on specific words, sentences, paragraphs, you do the details. If a title is there, you might make some kind of connection with it. Then you draw connections, you analyze it, you make your inferences, and then you come up with the overall point. So the same way that you approach a text is going to be the same way that you approach a picture. We're not going to do this anytime soon, but later on in the year, we'll do things where I just throw a picture up on the board, like, an artistic picture, and go, okay, analyze it. What do you see? And you just write it out in paragraph form. It's like doing a TWA with a passage, but you're doing it now with just a picture. Because you go through the same process. You still have details, you're still making connections, you're still drawing conclusions. It's not any different than really doing it from any kind of regular rhetorical analysis that we would do. So to kind of see how this can all start to work, on the next several slides, we're going to take a look at 3 synthesis prompts from past AP exams. We're not going to look through all the sources, but I have the prompt. We're going to brainstorm, and then we're going to take a look at the visual sources to see, okay, how could you actually put this into practice so that when you get your visual sources tomorrow, or they're showing up on any AP exam, or TWAs that we do in class, and we will do synthesis TWAs. So we'll get practice writing those in a small amount of time as well. You have a better idea as to what you can do for it. So we got a test question from, I think this one was 2008, 2009. You got the following sources that you'd be reading, although we're not going to take a look at them. Then an essay that synthesizes at least 3 of the sources, because 3 is the number you always get. Develop a position about what issues should be considered most important in making decisions about space exploration. So you're not arguing whether you're for space exploration or not. You simply have to take a position on what issues, what factors do you need to consider. And that tends to be a popular way that the synthesis is set up, where a DRQ is, all right, take a stand on something. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times the synthesis is going to do more of develop a position about factors, issues that somebody must consider. Remember, when you're doing a synthesis, before you look at the sources, you want to start to brainstorm and come up with your own ideas. So without looking at any of the sources, what factors do you think should be taken into consideration if you're dealing with space exploration? So we've got 2, safety and cost. Cost of, like, just being able to physically build the stuff, send it out, and whatnot. Impossible question, but is there like a price tag in your head that's like, hey, this is too much?
Well, I can give you stuff that Elon Musk is working towards. I can't tell you what the actual thing is. Yeah,
he's Tesla, and then he's also, we're going to be able to get to Mars. He's hoping, was it 2030?
Yeah, he's put like $100 million.
Yeah, no, he's investing.
Yeah, 14 years. He wants to put it down to $11 million. I'll be there like that.
No, you said safety.
Safety.
Are you thinking about like the astronauts themselves?
So yeah, safety of the astronauts, and yeah, like also safety of, I guess, yeah, I guess just safety. I would say like safety of what's in space, but there's not that much.
And my food, what is drink?
Well, it probably will.
All right, what else? Safety and cost are probably going to be the 2 most popular ones, especially I'd say cost is going to come up over and over and over again. What else? Like, okay, like the overall, what are we getting out of it?
Yeah.
Value, purpose.
Going to Mars.
Andy or anyone else, are there
Did
any
you wear your hair?
Are there any things that you would say are valuable about current or proposed exploration, or are there any examples of people going, what's the purpose of that? Like where you're not sure.
People bringing back asteroids,
Good or bad? Like valuable or not valuable?
valuable, because they have a lot of minerals in
Okay. So, and some folks are looking at, hey, there's only a finite number of resources. If there's a way that we're able to harness resources literally out of this world and bring them back in, that could be very useful, very beneficial.
Elon Musk wants to make the human race multi-planetary so we don't just get wiped out with the U.S. or the planet goes by.
Okay, pretty much well accepted that we're, slowly but surely ruining the planet. Maybe not slowly anymore. We're ruining the planet. Maybe for our own survival, we need to start looking at other places that we can ruin.
It's dead very soon. Other life forms.
Do you want to meet E.T.?
Heck yeah, I do. You're telling me if an alien came to Earth, you wouldn't go to, like, try to find an
No,
alien?
have you seen the commercials on the movie? How they're trying to kill everybody and the
I think it's
If you were to find something, if you were to discover, whether it be a whole other planet, extraterrestrial or whatnot, certainly there's a lot of pride, fame, notoriety that would go with that. That's a reason that some folks would certainly do it or want to continue. What else? Other factors now. It doesn't have to be dealing with value, purpose.
Experience.
Do you mean like
Like, do
experience?
they know what if they like something went wrong? Do they know what to do?
Okay.
Are they trained to go up there.
So kind of along with the safety, appropriate training, knowledge. You can't really call in for help and backup and have people showing up very quickly. If you did go to a place like Mars or whatnot, it's going to take a really long time to get there. So, the duration of the trip in itself. I don't recall the year. Anyone off the top of their head, like Juno's the newest spacecraft, that people are focusing on because of it going towards Jupiter. I don't remember when it took off. Anybody know? I was going to say maybe 5 years ago or.
Yeah, I think it was like 2009 or something like that.
Okay.
It was late 2000.
So it'd be like 7.
Yeah.
So it'd be going from Earth to Jupiter, and you kind of think of Jupiter as being mid, within the solar system. That's a pretty long time. And then what? I think the computer started to shut down. They're having technical issues with it. There's a European satellite land rover thing that was going towards Mars, and then it blew up, crashed. So. So with the cost, there's not only the cost of putting everything together, but is it worth it if it doesn't work, and the issue blows up? The newest thing that people are really not the newest, but one of the more popular things that people are talking about now is Planet 9. There's that planet that no one has seen, but from a scientific standpoint, because of orbits and whatnot, they're pretty sure there's something out there past Pluto that's not a dwarf planet, but it's a legitimate, large, big planet that takes I think they said 10 to 20,000 years to orbit the sun because it's so far out there and it's throwing everything off base. So if it's taking, let's say, 7 or 8 years to get to Jupiter, how long is it going to take to be able to get to that bit? The answer is a long time.
I guess checking up on all the technology they have up there, like they have Hubble up there and all those things.
Uh-huh.
So I guess learning more about the stars, learning more about. I guess that could just be length of exploration.
Well, I mean, certainly, and we don't have the word up here, but, learning or education. Is there educational value to it? I mean, we mentioned value, purpose. One of those things could be, hey, we need to be more knowledgeable about the worlds around us, the universe. We're a very small part of a much larger body. We can't just focus on one aspect, one small part of it. That's the picture that you get with this prompt.
Oh.
And I think initially people look at it and go, it's a rocket. It's taken off.
Look
Yep.
at all that stuff.
People go to space in rockets, source A, isn't going to be a good use of the source. But whether it be based on stuff that we were mentioning before or new ideas that maybe this could stimulate, what are ways in which you could use that visual source? Besides going, people go to space in rockets.
You bring up how dangerous it is to actually go to space in a rocket.
Why? Like what about this is going to make us go, okay, it's dangerous?
I'd bring up the smoke that's coming out from under the rocket.
All right, there's a lot of combustible parts down here. There's going to be a lot of smoke that's going to be showing up just for liftoff in itself. We didn't really mention this, but some folks, what would be a concern about all of that exhaust? The environment itself. Is it good for the environment? that you're going to have all this crud coming out of the rocket. Once it gets up into space, and I have no idea the year of this, it doesn't tell us, or the rocket itself. I'm guessing we're probably looking maybe 70s or so, but I have no idea. What's going to change about the rocket once it gets outside of Earth's orbit or atmosphere? It's probably going to.
It's gonna break apart. Not like in a bad way, but more like a
Right. You have like this, I'm going to say roughly there, you got the big booster down here, rocket that's going to get you up there, and then probably the top part is going to detach, disconnect, and then that'll kind of go off into space and do its thing. What's going to happen to that bottom part?
It's gonna fall down.
No, it's not.
No, it's gonna stuck in the I always thought it fell.
It's probably going to get stuck in orbit, so if any of us were to go out into space outside of the Earth, there's a whole bunch of junk out there. There's a satellite there, there's some debris there, there's some junk there. You mentioning, something, that could be dangerous, you have all these moving parts, something could go wrong. It doesn't take a whole lot to throw a whole entire mission off. There's also going to be, more debris kind of coming from it that could be environmental concerns.
You're talking about the whole support of the entire thing, like how much you really need to launch somebody into space.
Sure. I mean, and I would think that would definitely work when you're getting into the whole budget issue. I mean, there's a lot of time, money that goes into planning, a lot of time, money that goes into training. There's also a lot of time, money that's going to go into building that. There's a lot of time and money that's going to go into building that and building that. And there's a lot of, money certainly going into the area in itself, because you can't do this on any city street corner. You need to purchase big areas of land, which they have, Cape Canaveral and whatnot. But yeah, it takes a lot of money to maintain all of those things. The sheer magnitude, of these things, down here, you have a couple cars, trucks. So from a scale standpoint, that's a person. That's all this other stuff. So certainly, yeah, the expense, the danger, the amount of time that needs to go into it. Absolutely. Cody, did you have something?
Would you say though it helps employment?
Sure.
People things to build.
Yeah.
Do all that stuff.
We don't know the exact numbers, but you absolutely could look at the manpower needed, the employment, the jobs. I mean, these are serious construction jobs. You need people to build this, you need people to maintain it, you need people who are going to be working there. So, yeah, certainly there's a cost that goes into it, but it's also a way that whole community, that whole city, surrounding area could survive and whatnot. So by no means and I think a lot of times it'll happen, people will use a source mostly in a positive way or a negative way. I bet a lot of people would look at the cost that would go into making it. I don't think as many people would take the viewpoint, which I think yours would be effective, that hey, this could be beneficial for the community, where you could get a lot of jobs building, employment opportunities for people who would be in the area. So the thing that we want to at least have people start to take note of is you can use these in a multitude of ways, but you focus in on specific parts, make inferences, draw connections, and put all that stuff together to make your own conclusion as to how you could use the source. But, Cody could make a reference to one of the things that has to be taken into consideration is budget, not only of the cost, but also the benefit that could be happening to the community. That does not get mentioned in the picture source, but you could certainly still cite the picture by making reference to the structures that need to be built, the manpower necessary. Put source A next to it. You have used that source. Still your idea, but you've used the source.
Don't they need to rebuild the arms every time on that structure they build it up? It doesn't just rip the arms off.
they detach.
I thought it just ripped them all.
Have to go back to my armed robbery joke, but
Yeah, good. That was one where the kid was swinging the.
So new question. Read the following sources, including the introductory information carefully. Then in an essay that synthesizes, again, 3 sources, evaluate the most important factors that a school should consider before using particular technologies in curriculum and instruction. So again, it's not, is it good or bad, but what are the factors that should be considered before implementing particular technologies? What do you think? Reliability. I had a hard time connecting to the Apple TV last period, so it was a little bit of a reliability issue.
How much kids are actually going to benefit from it.
So like educational benefit. Any examples come to mind, like things that you don't think would be beneficial that might get used?
Kids, yeah, download games on iPads. Just use
But
that.
that's abuse of it.
I haven't said anything that can benefit. You say things that could benefit.
Yeah, I mean either way.
Well, for I guess beneficial is quicker access to like the internet. If you need to, teachers could put things on the internet.
And it's certainly going to vary from class to class, teacher to teacher. It's also going to vary from student to student. You know, you could be, someone mentioned earlier about ebooks. They said, nope, I'm not a fan of them whatsoever. And Alexis is shaking the head no, so I'm guessing she's not. Of all people, and she was the last one I expected to like reading on an iPad or Kindle, Mrs. Kane loves reading books on her iPad. I don't really know why. She just does. I think it's the convenience. It's always there for her. Depending on what kind of learner you are, like from a textbook, if you're used to regular textbooks, sometimes people can remember information in a textbook based on where it is. I know I read this. It's on the left side of the page, second column, and then you can kind of visually start to see it. Or some people go, wait a minute, there was a chart. Yep, I can see it, and you can visually pick it out. Where if you're reading something on a tablet, you're basically scrolling, and so the information, it's always on the same spot, it's mid-page, and so some folks have a tougher time remembering it. But certainly the convenience, not having to carry all the books in the backpack, someone might look at, yeah, that's a benefit. It makes my life much easier. I don't have sore shoulders. Some people would go, but I have sore eyes, you know, by having to read them all the time. So there's certainly multiple avenues that you could take with it. What else? Implementing technology. So we got reliability. Is there any kind of benefit? Certainly could have that C word show up again that we had in the last one. Yeah, cost. Could be cost to district, could be cost to students. If you get an important piece of technology, generally there's usually insurance plans then that people have to pay for. Might not just be financially feasible, you know, at the time. Anything else? Can you think of any technology outside of light bulbs that like you need?
Watch. Mechanized air filter.
Good question.
Yeah, heat and air conditioning.
A watch.
Well, but I would say particular technologies in curriculum and instruction, that's maybe where those things aren't. Remember transparencies? Like the overhead projector?
Those
Those
things
are
are
fun.
awesome.
All the little markers.
Is this any better than that?
Same thing.
No.
You said yes?
Slow guy say yes.
Why?
Because there'd always be a point in time where like the teacher would be like, okay, you today you get to wipe all the things off to redo them, and like it would not be time to wipe them off and redo it, and it would always be smudgy.
Okay. So if you were doing it later in the day, it might be a kaleidoscope of smudges, and you can't necessarily read it. Okay.
But like with those, like you'd always get like the big. They'd always have the big like 3-ring binders full of them. Now it's you go online, click a little thing, and you start it up, and you have your.
As to why this is
Yeah.
easier? Last year, Smartboard for me went out for like about a month. It was like a 4 to 6 week period. I was in tears. You know, I had to be consoled by first period just so I could get through the rest of the day. And part of it was after I wrote everything down, and I, you know, used the whiteboard instead. What I have to do with it? Erase. I did look for a for a projector. I couldn't find one anywhere in the building that you know was usable that I could get access to. I like the fact that I can save 5th period versus 4th versus 7th versus 1st because we would still come up with different things. So when we come back to the notes, they're the notes that we were talking about. So for me, certainly, yeah, I think it is certainly easier. If they took it away, could I still teach? Yes. So is it absolutely necessary? No, but certainly it's a convenience that I've grown accustomed to and like. From an educational standpoint, calculators, you know, projectors, computers, laptops, is there anything that you don't think you'd be able to live without? Calculator. And especially if you're taking like trig, calculus, the graphing calculators are something that you need in order to understand how the parabolas are going to get the variable, how they could get varied based on different numbers and whatnot that get put in there, the formulas and things like that. If you are in a science class, you're certainly going to have, based on the discipline, the subject area that you're in. If you're in a science class, there's going to be more technology that you're going to need within the lab, to be able to do things than if you did not have them.
Like installation.
Yeah.
Because I know it's like kind of like a.
And that could be part of the reliability, the cost, and all that kind of stuff.
It's like a pain to set up projectors.
There's a lot of infrastructure, wiring that needs to get done.
Like servers and all that.
And so if you have a building that is older, to run all the cable, the wires and whatnot, it's going to be an absolute pain. No doubt about it.
That's a picture for technology.
I don't even know. Is that a kid in the bottom?
Yes. So down here, you got a kid
It's like TV.
looking on like a TV screen, sitting in a dark lit room.
Oh, and the
With a
actual
window
thing
at the
that's
top.
happening.
And something that people will then notice is what he's viewing on the screen is the same thing that is out the window up top. So what could you do with this? Both for negatives and positives.
Why look at a simulation or something when you can look at a real thing?
Okay, so he has the potential to experience it if he simply goes outside. All right. Is there a word or phrase that you would use to describe him since he's not experiencing it? Did you say lazy?
Isolated.
Okay. Consumed. And all of this would be unnecessary in our minds because he could watch the same thing if he simply went outside. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but
So someone made the point earlier, and you're kind of doing the same thing.
he's stuck in a hole.
What's the benefit of this?
He can see what he can't.
He can see what he wouldn't otherwise be able to see because from the perspective, there's no way he can really look out that window and see anything. So it is a way for him to see beyond his barriers. Kind of like I said to Cody with the last one, I think for the cost, most people will talk about the cost of what we're going to make the space shuttle, where he's looking at the financial benefit of the employment of people who would actually construct it. Same thing here. I bet majority of folks, number one, not everyone I think would notice about the TV in the window. They go, he's watching a TV. What's the big deal? Then folks who realize that, all right, this is the same thing, I think most will take the negative viewpoint of why not just go outside, but you certainly could look at the idea that he could see beyond his surroundings, his barriers, at what he wouldn't otherwise be able to see. So it's not, again, that one is right, one is wrong, one's better than the other, but you do have the flexibility to do multiple things with them.
This might be like really stupid, but if you can't see out the window, how do you know what you're seeing on the screen is what's really beyond there?
Plato wrote about this in Allegory of the Cave, which is the whole idea that if a person is in a cave, all right, now, and Plato does this, thousands of years ago, but his whole idea is, what if you're in a cave and what you see are reflections? So JT is chained to a wall. This is literally the way Plato sets it up. You're chained to a wall. You can only see that wall. All right? Behind him is a fire. And then someone has puppets. And so what do you see on the wall? He sees the shadows. That's the only thing he ever sees in his life. So you view that wall as being reality. What you see, like the pictures that are on there, the shadows, that's the only thing that you know this is reality. Or if then all of a sudden the next day we plopped you outside, you wouldn't believe anything that you saw because that is not your reality. That would almost kind of be a dream. And yeah, you could make the argument for the same thing, and Cody, it's not stupid because I bet it's inspired by that allegory. It's a famous philosophical comparison that for him, this is probably his reality. If you did put him out there, would he even recognize that it's all the same or whatnot? So again, you could view that in a negative light as he has been consumed. He doesn't even know what is real, what is not. You could look at it also, again, kind of in that it's an opportunity for him to see something real that he would otherwise have no ability to do. Certainly the darkness, that's in there, you have a little bit of light at the top. I would say it's a pretty gloomy picture, probably meant to have a little bit more of a negative connotation to it, but that doesn't mean you can't look at things being viable and whatnot. Some folks look at him as being isolated. I don't remember who, JT, did you say the word isolated? Some folks would switch it, because isolation I think we look at as doing it to ourselves. Some folks would say he's trapped. And this is his outlet, to seeing real things. So you can certainly do some different stuff with it. I don't think this is a picture that anyone who read the prompt was expecting to see, but it's something that you can still work with. Last one. Imagine that a community is considered organizing a locavore movement. Probably don't know what a locavore movement is. Yeah. Locavore movement, and they explain it in the prompt, means that you would only purchase or use food that you could get within your local area. So it's like a carnivore eats meat, herbivore eats like vegetables and plants, locavore eats local food. Carefully read the following. This one had 7 sources. Synthesize the information from at least 3 of the sources and incorporate into a coherent, well-developed essay that identifies the key issues associated with the locavore movement and examines their implications. Only eating local. Again, not saying should you do it or should you not, but examine the implications, key issues associated with it. Strengthens the community? Okay. More of like community feel, interaction. All right. Dylan?
Wealth movement.
I'm sorry?
Wealth movement,
What do you mean?
because all the wealth will stay in the area, at least from a farming perspective, instead of going out to the.
Okay.
It's kind of like that. Yeah.
Amanda? There's a limited variety. And a lot of that's going to depend on where you live. Different areas grow different things.
Space. Might not have like space to grow vegetables or.
Urban areas, it's going to be more difficult. And you could even look at yards. Some people have a perfect yard for a garden. I have space. Others, you don't. Okay.
Environment, because then you don't have to ship everything.
So helping the environment,
Yeah.
you don't have like the carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Although at the same time, if you're Tom Joad, your environment
Yeah.
might not be too helpful in the middle of the Dust Bowl. So yeah, there certainly could be. And I think with this question, there was also a chart, and it was cost of transportation of food. So there was the cost, the carbon dioxide emissions, all of those things. We got a little comic strip. Oh, how cute. If you want to eat better for you and the planet, become a locavore. Eat food sourced from within a 100-mile radius. I'll try that. Walks out the igloo, comes back. Parma, ham, French cheese, coconut macaroons. Weren't you trying to be a locavore? I was. Supermarket's only a mile away. I don't know why a rabbit's in an igloo. I agree. I mean, that's a philosophical question that could be an essay in itself.
Maybe this rabbit.
But how could you use this? I think the word that we were just using, based on your environment, sometimes some things will be accessible, some won't. Amanda's point, depending upon the season and whatnot, certainly this doesn't seem to be an environment that is going to allow for growth. Why does he like going to the supermarket?
Close.
It's close. Another C word for it. It's convenient. Do you want to give up the convenience to keep the money, the wealth within the community? Some people would, some people wouldn't. The variety of food. He's not going to be able to get that kind of stuff based on where he's living if he's not going to a supermarket. Since Cody earlier mentioned about jobs and talking about keeping wealth within the neighborhood, if Noah works at Giant Eagle and we all become locavores, what might happen to you? He could lose his job. We don't need the supermarket if all the local markets or if we can buy food and whatnot from them. Certainly when it gets into pesticides, organic, those kinds of costs, those are things that you can do. But even a simple little comic strip like this that initially people look at, oh, cute bunny, dumb penguin, it still is a viable source when it comes to answering that question about overall locavore movement. So don't expect that it's going to necessarily be a chart. It could be little cartoons like this one or the still shot that we had over here, but you still can get some significant information coming from it. So keep that in mind as we move forward, whether it be this synthesis that we're going to be working on or future ones that are going to be coming down the pike at some point. All right. So Wollstonecraft quiz tomorrow. Notes you can use, 20 points, same setup, single sheet of paper. This was like 7 or 8.
Yeah,